some of you, apparently a large part of you guys, are playing some really bad legends. So today I'm gonna go over which of your mains suck and why. Starting off the list, we have Octane, who actually is the most played legend at the moment at a 10.6% pick rate. But honestly, he's such a bad choice, and for 99% of the player base, he's being used as a crutch pick for having slow movement, taking too long to loot, or for those who don't know how to run slide properly. And you know, to be fair, his abilities will allow you to do even crazier movement techniques, but still, again, only a very small percentage of Octane players actually use him for movement, and the rest just don't want to stay behind their own team all game. Similarly to a legend like Wraith, people will see huge streamers like Storman utilizing insane mechanics and instantly assume that by playing Octane, they can recreate that perfectly. Many players would argue that, oh, I'm using him for the jump pad, I'm using him for the rotations, or I'm using him so I can take high ground, but fail to realize that plenty of legends can do the same, but better. Most of the time, his ultimate is a death sentence. When you're on a jump pad, you will move in a very predictable trajectory that is so easy to beam that it will be harder to hit you if you just stand still. Sure, you can double jump and maybe throw in a tap strafe, but it just takes a small adjustment to continue beaming an Octane from the jump pad. There isn't much more to be gained from padding straight into a team, and there isn't too much value running away with the pad either, because you'll be so easy to beam and then follow on the same jump pad if you even manage to survive in the first place. His team fight and general team utility is just too low to make him worth playing. If you want a movement legend with good horizontal utility, with a passive that enables movement plus a game-changing ultimate, look into getting Horizon instead. Next up is Wraith, who is a solid legend, but she just doesn't have a good place in the meta, and arguably the only reason she's seeing a 10% pick rate is because of content creators like Asu, Bade, and Lyric popping off when playing her. Her passive is non-existent, and if anything, only goes off after you're already dead. The portal is too short to give you any value in most situations, especially if you try to use her on the larger open maps such as Broken Moon or on Stormpoint. Her tactical doesn't really serve much use either, other than being a simpler repositioning tool to get back to your team, or to avoid yourself getting hit when placing your portal. Most Wraith players will pop the tactical only to prolong the inevitable and die once the phase runs out. And the thing is, her kit, other than her portal, is inherently selfish, and in Apex, team play and communication is extremely important. There's no wonder that most streamers who play Wraith play solo, and TTV Wraiths keep leaving once they get knocked. The only thing I'd argue Wraith has going for her is her small hitbox, which makes her difficult to duel against, it's difficult to track her animations, and of course you have the cool looking heirloom and now the prestige skin that came out this patch. If you're a Wraith main and want a legend with good mid-fight rotations on open maps, I'd look into Ashe. If you want another good flanker with better team play and similar team fight potential, I'd suggest getting Horizon, Maggie, or even Valkyrie, who provides significantly better rotations than Wraith ever will be able to. And of course, I can't make one of these videos without mentioning Pathfinder, who's fun and can be used to a certain degree in very high-ranked Apex if you know what you're doing, but barely has any value for the average player, and if anything, playing him is holding you back. But despite this, is somehow still on a 9.2% pick rate. The largest point of contention being his hitbox. Largest. I'm saying that he has a very large hitbox, which makes him easy to hit. And that's the largest point of contention, because he's big. This means that you have a massive disadvantage compared to anyone you end up dueling with. If you play Pathfinder, you have to make sure that you never take a fight head on and instead use your grapple or your zipline to create openings from off angles, with emphasis on the grapple and the zipline, because your passive is near non-existent and only lowers your ultimate cooldown for 10 seconds per scan. Hardly anything worth mentioning, especially when compared to all the other options out there. The grapple is fun to play around with and is a good way to get away from a fight, but once it's on cooldown, you are on your own and the enemy team can easily push up to punish you. If you're a Pathfinder player, you'd probably be better off by switching to Horizon or Valkyrie, as both of these legends allows you to play the exact same way, but with significantly more team play utility and much stronger potential when it comes to your duels. Moving on, here's a legend that I'm still going to keep putting down, especially because of how their pick rate is still so high, despite all the videos I've made about how bad they are. I'm talking about Bloodhound, who despite my Best Efforts still has a 7.8% pick rate. Bloodhound has a massive hitbox, a worse off version of Seer's tactical as a scan, and an ultimate that does give a little bit of fighting potential, but honestly doesn't do much other than make the enemies red most of the time. If you're playing Bloodhound, you might be a controller player who wants to use the extra strafe speed to win duels, or you're a new player who doesn't want to think about how to use your abilities, or I guess about the enemy's positioning. In the current meta, I'd only pick Bloodhound as a scan legend alongside Catalyst, so you can wombo combo and highlight as many of the enemy team as possible through her Dark Veil without having to aim. But in any other situation, over 99% of the game, Seer completely outshines Bloodhound. As for replacements, I'm just going to say, play Seer instead of maining Bloodhound. I'd add more supportive legends, but having a permanent wall hack in your team composition is just too strong to pass up on. This next legend might have a lower pick rate than the previously mentioned picks, but that doesn't mean that he isn't overrated. I'm talking about Revenant, who is sitting at a 2.1% pick rate. That is 2.1% too much. Revenant has a passive that only works for surprising the enemies, and the ability to spam crouch, which is confusing for inexperienced opponents, but makes him even easier to beam once the jig is up. His tactical is fine, I guess, but the ultimate makes for such an outdated playstyle. It just isn't worth it to run him. Revenant's ultimate has been nerfed hard ever since he was meta, and because of how easy it is to tell where Revenant and his team is going to be coming from, that means that the enemy team you're trying to push will end up sending you back before you even get damage in the first place. If you are a Revenant main, I'd recommend almost any other legend that isn't on this list. It doesn't really have a real role in a team composition, except maybe like a fragger support, so look into Horizon, Valkyrie, or Seer instead. And of course, next up we have two sides of the same coin, wattson and Caustic, both sitting at a rough 2.4% pick rate. Unlike the other legends in this video, I won't tell you to flat out stop playing either of these two legends, but you should probably reconsider whichever of the two you are playing to make sure you get the most out of it. Because while both wattson and Caustic are two very strong bunker legends, they work a little bit differently. Both can set up in buildings and hold a position to make it difficult for an enemy to push, but Caustic will be stuck inside of that building because his traps are only a fraction as efficient in the open, as they are much easier to destroy from afar, and most of the times the enemy can simply walk around the traps to get an angle on you and your team. And that's the cost that he has to pay to be the strongest legend to hold a building with, as activated traps can hold off doors, spraying gas for 11 seconds after activated, and you can even throw your gas grenade on the ground to stall a fight out for an additional 15 seconds, at which point you probably have restocked the traps that the enemy team might have had destroyed. Caustic can stay alive, even with both his teammates dead, and he keeps the pressure up on any position within a building. Wattson, on the other hand, is generally much easier to push, just break a fence node and maybe her ultimate and run in, but she is a lot more versatile. She can set up in the open, claiming entire areas, buildings, or high grounds for herself, and sort of scaring off other teams from trying to fight her immediately. She can also set up fences in some spots on the map which are near impossible to destroy without going straight through them, taking damage, and getting stunned in the process. My point here is, if you play Caustic but find yourself in the open and need some more versatility in your setup, wattson might be for you. On the flip side, if you're playing inside of buildings all the time and wish that your defensive legend was a little bit stronger, then you might want to pick up Caustic instead. Both are generally valid, depending on your lobbies of course, because if you're playing Caustic or wattson in public matches, you're a weirdo.